When I pulled into the gravel drive that evening, I knew something was wrong, before I even stepped out of the truck. My family's forest had a rhythm, a hum, a way the trees and the wind talked to each other, and that night it was gone. Instead of the soft rush of pine needles and the smell of mossy ground, there was an eerie stillness, the kind of silence that feels like the world is holding its breath after something violent has happened. I didn't even bother unloading my gear. I walked straight past the shed, through the blueberry patch I'd tended since college, and stopped cold where the woods used to thicken into a wall. There was no wall anymore, just torn-up earth, raw red clay stumps like amputations, dust hanging in the air, where old oaks had stood for centuries. It was like someone had taken a razor to the skin of the forest. My stomach dropped. And then I heard a voice behind me, rough, steady, familiar. "You're back early." It was Tom, my caretaker, former park ranger and part-time philosopher, holding a flashlight like it was a weapon. He looked uneasy, and that alone scared me more than the devastation in front of me. We ended up on my porch, the drone humming above us, its camera feeding straight to my laptop. What I saw almost knocked the air out of my chest. 80% of my land, gone. Entire corridors bulldozed, wetlands carved up, creek beds flattened. And the kicker, bright metal stakes planted in neat rows, ribbons flapping like mocking little flags. Future site of Willow Bend Trail, brought to you by the Willow Ridge HOA. Sponsored, they said, by some county green initiative. They'd even put up signs with smiling logos, as if my forest had just been a blank space on their development map. I didn't need Tom to say much. He told me they'd held a ribbon-cutting ceremony, that the HOA president, Linda Palmer, was all over the papers calling it the eco-hub of the community. They had forged papers saying I'd donated 900 acres for public good. I laughed not because it was funny, but because the absurdity was louder than the rage burning inside me. Donated. My family's land, 3 generations of blood and sweat bulldozed into a photo op Linda Palmer had picked the wrong man to mess with. By morning I was showered, suited up, documents stuffed in my old leather briefcase. I walked into their glass-walled HOA office like I owned the place. The receptionist stammered something about an appointment, but I didn't hear her. I pushed through until I found the fake gold nameplate, President Linda Palmer. I knocked once and walked in. She was at her desk, nails clicking against the glass surface, finishing a phone call. When she finally looked up, she gave me that slow, smug smile of someone who thinks she's already won. "Mr. Kessler," she said, like we were friends. "How wonderful to finally meet." "You bulldozed my land," I said flatly. "You destroyed federally protected zones without permission, without authority, without even the decency to make a phone call." She tilted her head, feigning innocence. "We assumed it was relinquished. Abandoned land, no fencing, no maintenance. We had the paperwork." She gestured at a stack of folders like that made it true. I pulled my deed and easement papers from the briefcase and dropped them on her desk. "These are the originals. This forest isn't just mine, it's protected. You bulldozed endangered plant zones and polluted creeks. You've got one chance to explain before I file charges." She leaned back in her chair, unbothered. "You need to see the bigger picture. That land was doing nothing. Now it benefits the whole community." I couldn't help but smirk. "You mean it benefits your nephew's contracting company?" For the first time, her smile faltered. Just for a second. But I saw it. That was enough. I stood and told her, "This isn't over." That night, my cabin turned into a war room. Tom brought out maps, I stacked survey records, and I called in every favor I had. Nora, a land use attorney I trusted, drove in with her laptop. Ellis, an ecologist with a sharp tongue, started building models of the damage. And Caden, one of my old students turned drone tech wizard, set up servers and began tracing metadata. Within hours, we uncovered the rot. Fake nonprofits issuing tax deductions, shell companies with no employees, grant money funneled straight into Palmer family pockets. They hadn't just stolen my land, they'd built a conspiracy around it. The HOA fought back. Flyers nailed to my trees claimed my forest was a fire hazard. Local news ran stories of teary mothers talking about dangerous overgrowth. County zoning even sent me a warning letter threatening forced clearance. And one night, 3 SUVs idled at my southern boundary, with headlights aimed at my cabin, like some cheap intimidation stunt. Tom just loaded shells into his pump shotgun and said, "You never know." But intimidation works both ways. With Ellis's surveys and Caden's tech, we built an immersive simulation of my forest before and after. It was brutal. You could toggle between lush green soundscapes and the silence of destruction. We launched it online, sent it to reporters and nonprofits, and within days, the story exploded. Petitions swarmed national outlets, ran headlines about greenwashing fraud, and Linda's smiling photo ended up under the title, "When Eco-Trails Destroy Ecosystems." That's when the feds came sniffing. First, a young guy named Clay, supposedly a conservationist, who'd just bought land nearby. Too clean, too polished, driving a beat-up Subaru like it was costume. Tom leaned over to me and muttered, "Fed." He was right. Clay asked about equipment sightings, probed gently, never admitting anything. Within weeks, HOA board members stopped their Thursday eco-walks. Their social media went dark, and Linda vanished from public view. Caden traced the grant money, $795,000, into 10 shell companies, including one registered to Linda's dog groomer. Ellis confirmed 2 destroyed zones were state-protected buffer areas, a felony. And then the email dropped. Check Linda's GIS maps. They're doctored. That was the nail in the coffin. Fake maps meant federal wire fraud. Her lawyer tried to settle, offered hush money and non-disclosure agreements. I sent back 2 words, "See you." Next line in court. The trial was like walking into a mausoleum, marble walls, cold, lighting a jury that looked half horrified before we even started. The prosecution opened with Caden's simulation. Silence filled the courtroom as green forests faded into brown wasteland, on the screen birdsong replaced by static. Then Ellis testified, his voice steady, as he explained permanent ecological loss. The jurors leaned forward, some of them pale. But the knockout punch was Tom. He walked in wearing his old ranger uniform, medals polished, and calmly unspooled the entire scheme. He even played recordings from HOA Eco Patrol meetings he'd attended undercover. Linda's voice echoed through the speakers. "No one challenges green projects. Paperwork here, buffer zone there. By the time he notices, it'll be public access." The room went ice cold. The defense collapsed in a day. Forensic accountants laid out the shell companies and laundered funds like a crime map. Fraud, forgery, conspiracy, obstruction, environmental sabotage. It was a mountain no slick lawyer could climb. Linda didn't even testify. When the verdict came, the judge's voice was steady. Guilty on all counts. 25 years in federal prison, no parole. Board members got 5 to 12. The HOA itself dissolved its assets, seized and auctioned. I was awarded restitution, $2.6 million, but more important, my land was redesignated as a federal ecological reserve. Permanent, untouchable. It took months to restore what they'd destroyed. Federal grants helped, but I poured most of the restitution into replanting native species. Ellis oversaw crews of students planting saplings. Nora helped lock the legal protections so tight that no HOA, no zoning board, no politician could ever touch it again. Caden turned the simulation into an interactive exhibit for schools so kids could see firsthand what greed does to nature. And the neighbors. They dissolved their HOA too. 93% voted it out. The rest clung to Linda's ghost, but they lost. They formed a cooperative instead. No forced fees, no fake authority, just neighbors deciding together. They even invited me to speak at the first meeting. I showed up in jeans and flannel, told them they didn't need a president. Just respect and boundaries, and maybe one guy to stop Jim from putting plastic flamingos on his roof. They laughed. It felt good. 1 year later, a streaming service launched a docuseries on HOA corruption. And who did they cast as a co-host under house arrest? Linda Palmer herself, ankle monitor and all. First episode, How to Lose a Forest and Gain 25 Years. They invited me as a guest. I walked in with my old field jacket boots still muddy and sat across from her under the studio lights. She tried to smile. "Welcome back, Mr. Kessler," she said softly. I leaned in and whispered, "The forest says hello." She had no comeback. The clip went viral overnight. Now at the southern border of my land, a steel sign is bolted into a granite boulder, Private Ecological Reserve, entry by written agreement only. The trees are watching. And at the road into Willow Ridge, another sign stands. This land is proudly free of HOA control forever. Sometimes I sit on the porch at sunset, bourbon in hand, listening to the young trees sway like they remember the ones that came before them. And maybe, just maybe, they do. So here's my question for you. Do you think the punishment fit the crime? Was 25 years enough for what Linda and her crew did, or should communities like hers face even harsher consequences when they weaponize power and destroy lives? Drop your thoughts down below, share this with someone who's fought a battle against greed, and if you've ever had your own run-in with an HOA, I want to hear your story.